So excited for this event and so grateful that you are logging on. Some of you are also in person in the library. I'm going to give everyone like 1 or 2 more minutes to get into the space and get comfortable, and then we are going to go ahead and get started. So just hang tight for 1 or 2 more minutes. All right, Gabe, whenever you're ready.
I'm talking. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our speaker event with Doris Munoz. My name is Gabe Gardner, and I'm a junior here at Akalani's. I'm the president of the Jewish Student Union and a member of the Diversity Board. Tonight, you and I get the privilege to meet Doris Munoz and hear her story about supporting her family while also making a name for herself in the world. I'm joined tonight by 2 of my amazing friends who will help facilitate this conversation with Doris Munoz. Firstly, Zoya Acuna, the president of Latinos Unidos Club. Joined by her is Marisa Guerra Echeverria, the head section editor of our school's highly acclaimed and well-known Blueprint. A couple things before we get started. We hope to have time at the end for a Q&A. You can submit questions using the Q&A feature within the Zoom, and we will select a few to ask Doris. Also, a big thanks to the Akalani's Parents Club for co-sponsoring this event tonight, along with the student government. Also, a special shout out to the fabulous Miss Walton. I'm glad to introduce Doris Munoz to you all, but first, let's take a second to watch the trailer for Doris Munoz's documentary, Mija.
It takes a lot of courage to make your own path. I was that girl in the audience dreaming for a bigger life. My 2 biggest fears were the rapture and my family getting deported. And then 5 years ago, my brother Jose was deported. Our parents came to the U.S. to give us a better life.
Esa es mi hija, Doris Anahi Munoz García, nacida en este país.
And then we spend our lives with the pressure to honor their sacrifices. Music became my sanctuary. But dreaming big takes a toll.
It's too much. It's too much.
I need to figure out what my next move is. I think I've just discovered someone special.
There's this manager that hit me up.
If she used to manage Cuco, then what makes you think she couldn't do the same for you?
The blood, sweat, and tears that go into this means something to someone. We inherit our family's dreams, but also their fears.
I don't want you to feel alone in this moment of like how much pressure it feels like. Estás sola.
We hurt.
You're a Latina. And that's something powerful.
Doris has become a champion for mentorship, representation, and community building. She has been creating safe spaces of growth and expression for those wishing to belong in the music industry, either in front of the stage or behind the scenes. Besides guiding the next generation's Latinx indie artists, Doris also serves as a senior fellow in civic media at University of Southern California's Annenberg Lab and has produced Selena for Sanctuary shows at the Lincoln Center, Summer Stage, the Ford, and the Grand Park. Without further ado, I'm glad to introduce you all to Doris Munoz. So please join me in giving her a warm welcome to her.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. No, it's truly an honor. I was in student leadership when I was in high school myself, and these were such beautiful formative years that allowed me to dream big and to really prepare myself for what was to come. So really kudos to all of you for organizing, for facilitating, for holding intentional space for our kinds of stories to come to the forefront. I'm sorry if you can hear the ice cream man in the background. I live in Boyle Heights in LA, and you just hear the ice cream man come around this time at night. So excuse any possible barking or more ice cream men to come. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. Everything that I've ever done or dedicated myself to has always been rooted in impacting our community, and this year has been an absolute whirlwind. Mija, to start there, and I guess to make our way backwards to set up the stage for tonight, Mija was made independently from 2019 through 2021, and December of last year is when we got the news that the film would be premiered at Sundance. And for those who don't know what Sundance is, it's probably the pinnacle film festival for the films to come of the year, the films that are going to be distributed globally, that are going to have big campaigns for the year. And so obviously we were honored that that's where we were going to be landing for the world to see this story. And from there, that's when the whirlwind happened of Disney then acquiring the film for distribution. And well, now we're here and being able to have such a powerful platform in order to engage our community and to make them feel seen and represented and heard. And so, yeah, I mean, it all started really through the power of being vulnerable and sharing my story. And I think for those who came before me and really express the power of vulnerability and sharing our story allowed me to feel like I could possibly do that one day. And for me, that came out of necessity. And so as you can see a bit of it in the trailer. I was born, the first one to be born in this country, from a family of Mexican immigrants that came to the United States September 16th, 1989. So that was just about 33 years ago. And so for those who are aware a bit of politically immigration and all that, in 86, there was a big movement of amnesty that allowed a lot of folks to immigrate in a way that gave them an opportunity to have the paperwork to thrive in this country. At that time, my whole mom's side of the family had immigrated to the States, and she had to stay back in Mexico to help my dad take care of his mom. And it wasn't until 89 that my mom really had to make the decision in order to immigrate. But unfortunately, when she immigrated, that's when the amnesty program had closed. And so they had envisioned that they were going to be receiving a similar path to citizenship in the way that her siblings did, but they missed it just by a hair. And so unbeknownst to them, they would then be cast in the shadows for the next 30 plus years. And so growing up, I was very conscious of this. I knew that I was the only citizen in my family. I knew that one day I could, be done with school and no one could be there to pick me up. And we had an emergency plan, and not really many knew of this because of where people stand on the line of immigration and what they feel about that. And so because of that, I stayed quiet for many years. And it wasn't until I was actually in high school that this is when conversations of DACA started coming to be. And when the immigrant rights movement was going forward full force, and it wasn't until a year after I graduated high school that DACA happened and granted so many folks a path to at least go to school in this country and to work in this country. My brothers are 7 and 11 years older than me. They were brought to this country when they were 2 and 6 years old, and they didn't have that opportunity. And so when I was in college and I was trying to figure out my way in, I, was the first in my family to go to university here in the United States. Both my parents did have careers in Mexico and went to university, but they had to leave that and couldn't continue their careers, their professions, their dreams in this brand new country. My mom was a nurse. My dad was, a graduate of broadcast journalism, had big dreams of being on the radio. And well, the reality hit them. And so growing up, it was extremely difficult to be constantly living in survival mode, but I always held on to this hope that like all of this struggle is going to be worthwhile one day. And so when I found my way, I went to Cal State Fullerton and I auditioned into their musical theater BFA program and got in. But 3 years in, I wanted to make a pivot in my career, and I realized that I've always been surrounded by music. I was raised in a family of musicians that, I was raised in the ministry, and all my uncles and aunts are pastors and worship pastors, and that was kind of the lane that I was raised to be in. Obviously, I didn't necessarily take that lane, but still found a way to share my light with the world and find a way to like help people and still have that heart of service that I think I was raised to become. And so at the end of the day, music had been in my DNA. I was raised singing in the church and grabbing my hands on whatever like public school program there was. My first instrument was saxophone. I got into orchestra, then I had to transfer schools, and then I got into choir. And then I found my way through because of so many beautiful mentors and angels, earth angels that were literally sent to me to like help me. Like, I grew up in a Title I high school, so we didn't necessarily have the funding for resources that allow us to flourish and develop our interests. But I had one choir teacher that always planted that seed in me and would drive me to like scholarships, auditions and performances and college fairs, and believed in me so much. And because of him, I am where I am today. And so I thought of him when I wanted to make this pivot. After like 3 years, I was about to complete my BA in theater, and I was going to take the route of starting the credential program so that way I can become a theater teacher. I had a dream of being a high school English and theater teacher. That's what I thought I wanted to do, because I just wanted to mentor the next generation so they know that like, I grew up in San Bernardino, and like it was a pretty tough city to grow up in because we didn't necessarily have the examples to be able to make it out, make something bigger of ourselves. But I just held on to that dream so tightly. And I had this really beautiful summer of music where all this magic was surrounding me, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, music is it at the end of the day. And so that's when I decided to double major in communications. They didn't have a music industry program, but they did have an entertainment and tourism studies program. So I ended up getting my double bachelor's in that. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to knock on literally every single door possible. And I started, I got a job on campus booking shows for our university, part of our student government there, called ASI Productions. So it's like the Associate Students Incorporated, but the productions arm. And a lot of folks from that productions arm have now become super successful, like Bad Bunny's art director, like a huge talent buyer that works with Coachella and When We Were Young and Day and Night. And like, we're all just now peers and getting to see each other like thrive in our respective niche pockets of the music industry. And so that's when I just started interning everywhere. And every single band that I booked, I kept in touch with their manager, with their booking agent. And I was just like, if you guys need help, I'm looking for internships, just let me know. And I started interning at an indie artist management company. And because of that indie artist management company, he gave me a recommendation when I had applied to RCA Records and doing an internship there with Sony Music. And RCA was one of their record labels. And so I interned with the Arts and Repertoire and Tour Marketing Department over at RCA Records. I interned at Columbia Records in their Arts and Repertoire Department. For those who don't know what the Arts and Repertoire for short is A&R, and those are the folks who scout talent and sign talent to these record labels. And all the while also interning at an event called School Night that would happen every single Monday night at this venue called the Bardot in Hollywood. And all the while I was living in Orange County and commuting from Orange County to Los Angeles to do these unpaid internships and doing 2 jobs on the weekends as a waitress in order to afford to do these internships. But I just wanted it so hard. Like, I knew that no one before me in my family could even find their foot in the music industry the way that I just did. And my brothers had big dreams of that. And so it came to my last year of school, and it was the day of my only music industry class midterm. And as I was studying like my flashcards with my college roommates, I got the call from my mom that my brother Jose had been deported. And he was only 29 years old, was brought to this country at 2 years old, was dropped off in Tijuana. We have no family there. And he was a DACA recipient. And so this came to a surprise for all of us. He was a DACA recipient, he was married, has 3 beautiful daughters, and had to leave that all behind and start a new life in Mexico. And so basically from there, that's when I was like, okay, I can't stay silent about this anymore. Like, I know that people have their opinions about the legalities when it comes to immigration, but all I wanted was for people to humanize it, like politics are one thing, but these are human beings and kids that didn't have a choice to come to this country. But, here we are. And so after that, it just lit a fire in me. And I think it started activating my voice and activating the ability to share our story in order to like find support. And so from there, I got to fundraise a bit in order to just at least have like a fund so that my brother can be, on his 2 feet. By some miracle, my mom's brother had just moved from Guadalajara in Mexico to Tijuana, to Playas at Tijuana, a month before my brother's deportation. And so by the time he had gotten there, my uncle was there to pick him up, took him in, and there it started. And so granted, right when this was happening with my brother, this was also election season. And this is when the previous administration was about to come into power. And so this was fall of 2015. I graduate summer of 2016. I get my first job in the music industry after Miguel did a secret show at School Night at the event that I was interning at. And right around that time, I met the artist that gave me my first shot. And her manager liked me and liked my work ethic, liked my spirit. And they invited me to be a part of their team as a tour manager and a day-to-day manager. And so then I hit the road. And so for those who don't really know, like those who are undocumented can't travel, right? So I didn't grow up going to Mexico or really anywhere because my parents were always fearful of like checkpoints, like even a traffic stop could possibly lead to a deportation. Back in the day, that's when undocumented folks couldn't have licenses. And so here comes this girl that like just grew up in Southern California, did not know the world like that. And then all of a sudden I just got put on tour. I got put on my first tour and traveled the country. They got me my first passport because she had a few dates in Canada. And all of a sudden, like my eyes were open to the resources that exist. But I was the only Latina in these rooms most of the time. We were doing big radio shows. And no one really looked like me in these spaces, but still I pushed on. And so here I am, like being the youngest of my family, but carrying all the weight in order to try to succeed, in order to help my family get out of their situation. And so then I moved to Los Angeles. I am like fully dedicated to developing myself in the music industry and thinking like, okay, I'm going to be at this job. I was like already making the plan. I was like, I'm going to be at this job for like 3 to 5 years, see the world, meet everyone, and then embark on my new journey, on like my next chapter. And then I learned my first really big lesson in the music industry that that not everything is necessarily stable. And you know, she was the girl that the artist that I mean, I won't mention her name, but the artist was signed to Columbia Records at the time, and she was a priority artist. She had been signed by the same man who signed Adele, and like they were like, she's gonna be it. But the song wasn't a radio hit, and they dropped her from the record label, and that budget was cut for a role like mine on the team. And so I was laid off right before my 23rd birthday, which is like all around Thanksgiving. So I got laid off right before the holidays. And from there, I just freelanced. I was like, you know what? I have to pay rent. I have to figure this out. And so I started freelancing. I signed up to be a temp with an agency in LA, and there I was. And I ran around everywhere. And I was a front desk attendant. I was somebody's temporary assistant. I was getting yelled at. I was getting underpaid. Like the full Devil Wears Prada experience, I feel, was like thrust upon me. And I remember this moment where I was passing out, like I had a gig passing out flyers after a show, and I ran into the drummer of the artist I used to work for, and I tried to hide the flyers because I was so embarrassed for feeling like all of a sudden, like I used to tell you, like I was a part of the management team, and now I'm giving you a flyer. And in that moment, I think that's when I was just like, something like sparked in me, and I was like, no, like we're going to come out on top, like something is going to happen. And so come the beginning of 2017, and I'm interviewing for major label after publishing company, after booking agency, and like trying to land my next full-time job in the music industry, and realizing no one's giving me a seat at the table. And I was like, you know what? Like I had gotten offered one job, and in my gut, I felt like this isn't right. The person who's the head of this company had just experienced like all these like abuse allegations. And I was like, I'm not going to be aligning myself with that. That's going to compromise who I am, compromising my morals. And so I didn't take the job, and I decided to start my own company, and I called it Mija Management, because I wanted to be able to like Robin Hood the resources that exist in the music industry and give it to people in my community. And that was the best decision I'd ever made. It was a huge risk. I had like $22 in my bank account, and I used like 12 of those to buy the domain name so I could be legit. When I was like emailing people, I'm like, yeah, it's Doris at mijamanagement.com. Like, here's my card, you know. Meanwhile, I am so broke. I am so broke, but I was broke with a big dream. And I saw the client that took me around the world at a backyard show in East LA, and I saw like 200 kids that looked like me as a teenager, looked like my cousins and my classmates, and they were singing every single lyric in English and Spanish. And this artist was named Cuco. And there we all of a sudden went from backyards in 2017 to Coachella in 2018 and international touring. Major record labels were all running to sign this kid. But meanwhile, beneath the surface of all of that, January 2017 happened. And I'm not even going to say his name in this room, but the previous administration was inaugurated. And there was very clear rhetoric about the immigrant community that was blasted on every single radio, every single TV. For those who do remember, you know what was said about the immigrant community. And it was something to demonize us and to villainize us, when I know my family, I know many immigrant families that come here with a whole heart just to like have a better opportunity than what they had growing up, to flee countries that were killing them, to flee countries that were full of war, that were destabilized by this government too. That's a whole nother conversation. But all that to say is that like I felt immediate fear, where I was like, all right, my brother was deported, and my parents next? Like, what's going to happen? And so in that, I decided to start a concert series called Solidarity for Sanctuary in order to raise funds for my parents' path to citizenship. They had been petitioned by my aunt in the 90s when she became a citizen, but had been in this legal limbo for years. And so here I was trying to fight for an opportunity in order to become their co-sponsor, basically. And so in that, the first concert was sold out. And then the second concert was sold out. And then the third concert was sold out. And these were all like 300 kind of capacity spaces in Los Angeles. But in those first three concerts, I was able to raise enough money in order to then do the application process with this beautiful nonprofit called Carecen in Los Angeles that provide free legal services. But the application fees alone were $6,000 for both of my parents. And that's like the vicious cycle that undocumented folks live in, is that they're exploited for their labor, still have to pay taxes, but don't receive a single benefit that this country has to give. And so they live in this vicious cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, just trying to provide for their family with no savings to even try to find a path to citizenship. And so I obviously then put that upon myself in order to be like, all right, we're breaking that, like right here, right now. And then that was when I had to have a serious conversation with my family about telling our story. And then that's the first time that we ever did press. And we did a mini documentary with Vice. We did a feature with Remezcla. LA Weekly was supporting what we were doing. LA Times was supporting what we were doing. We did another mini documentary with Me Too when we started the Selena for Sanctuary series. And so it was a spinoff of that, where we did a Selena tribute concert in order to raise these funds. And after the concerts that raised enough funds for my parents, the community was like, so, okay, is this going to keep going or what? And so then it grew. And so all of a sudden it went from clubs in LA to the Lincoln Center stage in New York City. And those who don't know what Lincoln Center is, it's the part of the Juilliard campus. And this is the most prestigious art university of this country. And so here we are. And so from there, I just created this beautiful movement of people who were so proud of their roots to hold both the space of what they're trying to accomplish here in this country, but honor like where their parents came from. And so within that journey, it just kept growing and it kept growing. So it went from Lincoln Center to Grand Park in Los Angeles, right in front of City Hall, to Central Park Summer Stage, to the LA Philharmonic at the Ford Amphitheater. And it's like I felt like I finally unlocked something where I felt like, okay, I felt like I was the only person that looked like me in these rooms, where all of a sudden we created space so that we didn't have to feel alone. And there was tons of us and beautiful allies as well. You know, in this movement, it's not just us that are pushing this forward, but it's really, you know, on the folks who are down to be our allies in this as well, because we can't do this alone. We need the support of everyone too. And so come 2019 is when Isabel Castro, the director of MIHA, approached me as she was given the funding to develop her first feature film. And so we were talking for months on what she was thinking about doing for this film. And it wasn't until summer 2019 when she had asked me how I would feel about being the protagonist of this film. And that's when I just, you know, I had to tell her, I'm like, let me pray on this, let me meditate on this, but like, let's meet, like come to the Selena for Sanctuary concert in New York City, because I thought she was living there at the time, but she was actually living in Mexico City. And so she flew from Mexico City to New York City just to take a meeting before the concert and to see the concert. And like, she was dedicated, like she wanted this so bad. And the moment that I met her, right after we met, we were waiting outside of the building that we were going to enter, and we run into my first boss in the music industry. The first person who put me on tour, but the first person who laid me off. And he saw me and he's like, I just saw you on TV. Because we had just gone on Univision to promote the Selena for Sanctuary concert at Central Park. This was the year that Kali Uchis was headlining. And I was just like, you can't make this up, you know? It was like divine intervention, where it was just like the confirmation, where I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. Because a younger version of myself needed a film like this to not feel alone, to not feel like I'm the only one that lives in a mixed status family. Like, I'm not the only one who feels the pain of my parents not being able to see the motherland, not be able to be with their family, who can't come to the United States, to be separated from what they've known for so long, and to not even have a path to continue their dreams. And I knew that in a way that like they had sacrificed what they needed in order for me to be able to live out my dreams. And in that way, some way fulfilling theirs too. And so lo and behold, here we are developing this documentary independently, and then the pandemic hits. And in that, my entire music industry shut down. So any of the money that we had envisioned we were going to be making that year in touring and festivals, all the plans we had made for releases just went down the drain, and everything came to a halt. And in that silence, I had a moment where I had to really take care of my mental health and really assess what is good for me at the end of the day. Because when I was a teenager, I wish these conversations around mental health started way earlier, but I had reached at a point of burnout where I was working, my trauma response as an immigrant kid was to overachieve. So I was class president. I was drama club. I was the thespian president. I was an AP honors student. I was at school from basically like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. because I just wanted to make my way out. And that carried on with me in my career. And as much as it gave me the gift of like being determined and driven and coming out ahead, it also came to a head where I had to shut down for a bit. But in that silence was when I was offered the fellowship with the Annenberg Innovation Lab over at USC, where my high school guidance counselor told me to not even apply to. But then here I am getting offered an opportunity to get paid to just learn and take a sabbatical with a beautiful cohort of fellows that do and dedicate their work of bringing art and impact together. And so it rejuvenated me. It reminded me of like why I did this in the first place, where 2020 hit us all in a very different way, but it redirected me. And so in that's when I was inspired and really advised to take a pivot. And so I decided to close down the artist management company. At that point, we had represented, I think we had like 7 clients on our roster. We were all touring, we were all releasing, but it wasn't it for me anymore. And so in the rest of the fellowship, it really made space for me to reconnect with my creativity. And I started releasing these like videos of me singing songs in my backyard, because I had like the safety net of like, I'm not seeing anyone because it's the pandemic and like, who's going to say anything? But I made a promise to myself that for my 27th birthday, I was going to release this video, and that video changed my life. And all of a sudden I have artists like Mon Laferte encouraging me to keep pursuing my artistry, or Jessie Reyes or Marisol from La Santa Cecilia. And the last thing to top it off was that America Ferrera reposted it. And I was like, she's been my #1 since day one. Like Real Women Have Curves was like really my first form of representation for someone like me. And now she's someone I can call a friend, and that's when I was like, okay, Doris, like you've been affirmed, keep going. And it really took me a year where just around that same time, conversation started for me to have an opportunity to launch a record label with like my dream indie record label group. And we had negotiated that deal for about a year. And in that year, I was given sign after sign after sign to release my own music. And like a dear friend by the name of Camilo Lara is an amazing composer, producer, artist. He did the music for Coco and Narcos and now Black Panther 2 and Thor. But before, he was a record executive. He was the president of EMI Mexico. So imagine if he decided to like just stay in his executive lane and not be creative. And he's like, I already see your trajectory, Doris. You're going to end up creative, but just don't take as long as I did. And then he ended up co-producing my first single. And so in the midst of all of this, in the midst of all the pain of 2020 and the shutdown and everything, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler if you get a chance to see the film, but I think for the sake of the story, April 16th, 2020, so a few weeks into the pandemic, actually. So I skipped a whole thing, but I think this is like the ta-da of all of it. My parents received their green cards in the mail. And so after years of waiting, my parents were in the shadows for 32 years. And in that summer was a summer that my parents were able to reunite with my brother after 6 years of not being able to see him. It was the first time that my dad had seen his brothers in over 30 years. And it was the first time that my dad got to see his mother's grave because he wasn't able to go to Mexico to say goodbye to her. And these are like the stories that we face for those who are stuck in this country because of the current immigration policies. And so in all of that, like that just gave me the hope to keep going. That like this is what I've worked so hard for. And obviously we're in production for this documentary and we don't even know what's going to happen. And then yeah, it wasn't literally until November of last year that I decided to say no to launching the record label because the deal wasn't right. And I decided to launch my own music. And then came this beautiful, brilliant team around me where a friend that I've known for years, who's brilliant, who matches my energy, who are aligned in so many ways, became my manager. And a dear friend who I call sister, who's the publicist to Omar Apollo and Jesse Reyes and Kali Uchis and Bar Lucid and more, then became my publicist. And then a dear friend who was my manager's roommate wanted to distribute my music. And so it's like when you finally say yes to yourself and to your dreams, like sometimes, you know, I felt like my earth angels, my guides, my ancestors were like, okay, finally, like we've been waiting for you to do this. Like I felt very Mulan, like I felt like they were talking to me in a way. And so when I finally made that decision, the path opened up completely. Like I got a radio premiere for my first single, got all the playlisting support, got all the editorial support, and I was so scared to get on the other side because okay, all these people knew me for years as a manager. Like, what are they going to think of me now as releasing my own music? But then it was just revealed to me that all the people that I convinced to be champions for the artists I used to represent wanted to champion me too. And so this year has been an absolute whirlwind from, you know, January was when the Mija premiere came out with Sundance. The day before the Sundance premiere is when Silvana Estrada, who's a Mexican artist who's up for Best New Artist at Latin Grammys this year, invited me to go on tour with her. And I hadn't even put out my first single yet. And so then I had to prepare to leave for tour in 10 days. And my manager at the time was in Chile, and I had to just FaceTime her and be like, we're going on tour. Like, and so then it just kept going from there. And so all that to say, yeah, it's been a whirlwind since. So went on tour with Silvana Estrada, went on tour with Mon Laferte, and then ever since Disney acquired the film and we've been running from there. The LA premiere of the film was at the Chinese Grauman Theater in Hollywood with La Leaf, which is the Los Angeles Latino International Film Festival that Edward James Olmos founded. Edward James Olmos played Selena's father in Selena, for those who know him, and it's been like the godfather, I feel, of like the Latino Hollywood community. And I just remember standing on that red carpet with my mom and with him and with the director, and like he just like ventriloquist was just like, how are you doing? Like, okay. He's like, just take it all in, just take it all in. And that's when I knew, I was like, okay, this is what happens. Like, and when you listen to your intuition and you listen to your heart and you follow your dreams, like as cliche as it sounds, like when I was in high school, I felt like my dreams were so out of reach. Like I was always like, how do people even get on stage or even get their records out or make music videos or tour the world? And then all of a sudden that curiosity turned into a career that just is still going, and it's not stopping. And it's been extremely challenging, but no one said it was going to be easy. And if I could speak to, you know, I graduated from high school, but now I'm going to age myself, but like 11 years ago, I graduated in 2011. And I just knew when I graduated, like something big was coming, and I wasn't even gonna know what was around the corner for me. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much my story in a nutshell thus far. And so I guess we can open it up to questions or advice. I'm an open book. One thing I did forget to mention is that when I decided to pivot out of management, I turned Mija Management into Casa Mija, and that became a mentorship community. And so all last year, I did free monthly Zooms on like basically providing like accessible music education. And it's been so beautiful to see the mentees from that program thrive, working for like Becky G's team now, like seeing, like running into some of these mentees at the Latin Grammys or at South by Southwest, like doing their thing. And so it's just really like, I think anything that I've ever done has always been about paying it forward and seeing more folks like us being able to have the opportunities that we never thought that we could have. And I know that like there's so many people that came before me that like climbed a really difficult uphill battle. It's like when I think of like when you're trying to open up a jar and you're like you're banging it and you're banging it, and the moment that you hand it over to your friend, it's so easy for them to open it. And I feel like if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I hope that whatever banging of the jar that I'm doing will make it just easier for the generations to come and try to fulfill their dreams too.
Thank you. We love that.
Thank you again so much for coming today.
Of course.
Okay, we have a few questions.
Okay, yeah, sure. So in your trailer for Mija, you mentioned feeling the pressure to be successful, like knowing that your parents sacrificed so much. And could you talk a bit more about your experience with that and how it shaped your career?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's just like everything that I've ever wanted to do was in order to like honor my parents like sacrifice, and that that struggle wasn't going to be in vain. So it's like something that I think like you always keep like in the back of your mind, and like when you feel like you're about to give up and you just think about everything that your parents had to go through in order for you to just even be there. And so it was always a motivating factor, but also acknowledging how difficult that also made things too, that pressure and how high the stakes felt. So it's like a double-edged sword, right? Where it's absolutely a motivating factor, but it could also be the pressure that can sometimes feel like it breaks you, but the only way out is through. And so you just have to like feel through those emotions and then recenter. What has always grounded me is just reminding me of like my purpose, and like what I'm meant to do on this planet.
Thank you. How does it feel to embark on your own musical career after managing artists for so long?
It was really hard. I mean, if you get a chance to see Mija whenever it does come out on Disney Plus, that you really see that time capsule of me pivoting from management to mentorship with the artist Jax Hop that you see in the film. And then at the very end, you see me singing with my uncle, but that was really, I think, just kind of like the Easter egg of like what was to come. But it was a lot of fear, like unfortunately, I was like bullied growing up, right? So I internalized a lot of that. Like I experienced cyberbullying when I was in high school. That wasn't great. And that's trauma that we have to like work through as we are trying to come into our own. And I think like a lot of it is just like us standing in our own way, because like we make these narratives in our mind of what people will think, what people will say. But at the end of the day, it's like I had to remind myself that like this is my life. like this is who I'm going to bed with every night and waking up to every morning with my own thoughts. And I knew that I just didn't want to live with regrets. And so as challenging as it was, it's also been extremely fulfilling, where the tour that I got to embark on with Mon Laferte in Mexico, it was the first arena I ever played, and it was on my grandfather's birthday in Puebla, and my grandfather went to university in Puebla, and it felt like this. I've experienced magic because of making that decision. So, I think I had to just really reconcile with the fact that like it's okay to reinvent yourself. and it's okay to make necessary changes that are good for your overall being.
Okay. Our next question is, I guess, what are some of your musical influences kind of in the music that you're releasing now?
Well, the music that is out is very inspired by, I think, all of my influences. So it's like indie music, very singer-songwriter. Like every song I've ever written has started on guitar and myself. But the production has been very inspired by like the music of like my ancestors. So like boleros, which are old like romanticas, traditional romanticas, and rancheras that my mom always wanted me to sing, but like I was such an emo kid growing up. I was like, Mom, let me sing my Paramore covers, you know, like leave me in peace. But little did I know that singing rancheras was what was going to change my life. And so I honor all those parts of me in the music for sure. And so like my favorite artist of all time is Linda Ronstadt. And I think for those who don't know who she is, she's like massive in the 70s, but also carries a very beautiful legacy. And she sang like every genre. So I was like, I'm a vessel. I'm just a vessel. And I'm gonna do whatever is like really like I'm born to do. And so that's kind of really my approach, I think, with all the musical influences. And she was also influenced by Lola Beltran, which is one of the most famous like ranchera singers from Mexico. And I'm very much influenced by Lola Beltran because that's my mom's favorite ranchera singer, Juan Gabriel. But then I'm also influenced by like amazing contemporaries too. Like Paramore is like my favorite band, and I think Hayley Williams is a brilliant songwriter, and I've been a fan of them since I was like 11 years old. You know, I was an emo kid growing up, and then found beautiful songwriting along the way. So anything that's alternative, I will be there, but also anything that's traditional, I'll also be there.
Awesome. So as you mentioned, you've supported acts like Kuko and helped that come about, and you've also worked with many Latino artists. Why is representation important to you in your management career and in the music industry?
Can you repeat that last part?
Yes. Why is representation important to you in your management career and in the music industry in general?
I think it's just very personal for me, you know, where I was very grateful and very fortunate to be able to intern in the major label system so I can have my eyes open to what are the resources that actually exist. And when I realized hardly any of those resources were going to folks in my community, I felt like this responsibility that I had to fight for that representation for us in these buildings. And in that, it created a whole movement. And so, you know, the power of representation is what allows people to even dream of that for themselves. Like if I didn't see people like America Ferrera on screen for me growing up, then I don't know what I would have thought of like myself being able to accomplish getting into Hollywood in any way, you know. And so I say this in the film, I narrate the film. And with the help of Jessica Salgado, who's a Salvadoran poet here in Los Angeles, and Walter Thompson Hernandez, who's also a writer, former journalist, director, all the things. And they really helped me find my voice in this. But a line that's always stuck with me is that it's like you can't dream of like a new face that you haven't seen, right? And it applies to us in that way, where it's like, if you see faces like us, like out here, like I think of like the new heights that Omar Apollo is reaching right now. And remembering the first time that he came to LA and like we just ran around like the mall and like and just seeing his growth over the last 5 years, like he's having his moment right now. And because of his moment, he's inspiring a whole nother generation of artists that are going to see him doing it and want to do the same thing he's doing. Representation is everything.
We were talking because we saw that you had Omar Apollo on one of your fundraiser concerts, which is so cool.
He played a couple actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he played one. His first show in Los Angeles was actually one of the fundraiser concerts at the Lodge Room in Highland Park. That was January 2018. And then I booked him for Selena for Sanctuary in Central Park, not Central Park, in Lincoln Center. And that's when Mon Laferte was our headliner that year too.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So just kind of a follow-up question from that. Do you have a dream artist that you would want to work with in the future?
Miguel. He has meant a lot to me over the years, especially like being from LA, being Black and Mexican, taking space in the general market as just like an R&B artist. People don't really know him as like a Latin artist. They just know him as like he exists, you know? And that secret show that he did at school night, he was so kind. I was like his production assistant for his team, and he was so kind. And I walked him to stage and he was asking me how I was doing, how my night was treating me. And I was just telling him how excited I was because my brother put me onto his music before he blew up. And this is my first time seeing him live. So I just felt very grateful. He's like, oh, is your brother here tonight? I would love to say hello. And that was a few months after my brother's deportation. And I didn't have the heart to tell him, but I was just like, oh, he's in Mexico, but I know he would have loved to have been here tonight. He's like, well, send him my love, tell him I say hi. And he just went on stage and I cried like a little baby. And I was like, I'm gonna make it, like it's gonna happen. And it was because of him. And so I actually ran into him in LA a few months ago. I ran into him twice at the same place now and got to tell him thank you for that night, for just being so kind and being himself. And that motivated me to try to make it in the music industry. And well, now we're here.
Yeah. And our final question for the night, and this comes from kind of the questions that are coming in through the Q&A from the audience. So if you could sum up your advice to young, aspiring POC artists and like Latino artists and just young people in general, what would it be?
Get involved wherever you are. If it's community based, or if you are able to go to a university, even if you want to like finesse the system and like go to a community college to just get a class in order to intern, that is really your foot in the door and just getting involved. I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't get that job on campus booking shows, if I didn't start building partnerships with like my college radio station or the local record label that was there in Orange County at the time. It's really about building community and looking to your left and right. I think like a lot of this is like Issa Rae has said this a lot in interviews, and I've always kept this in mind, where like a lot of folks are like so focused on like trying to reach what's above them, right? Like what record label executive is going to give me my shot, or like who do I need to reach out to? But it's really your peers. Like y'all are the ones who are going to grow together, that are going to glow together, and that's really going to be the people who are going to be rooting for you and having your back when it comes to opportunities that come your way and more. So, if you can fit in where you get in. So, internships in the music industry are mostly unpaid, but it's so worth it for the experience that you receive, for the opportunities that you get to have, the people you meet. But that was my experience. That's really the advice that I can give, and have seen it work countless times for people. Internships do lead to jobs if you work hard enough and you come to the table with a good spirit and a good heart. But you really have to love this. Like, this industry is not for the faint of heart, but if you really love this, it's possible.
Okay, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I know like story time went for some time, but I'm just like, it's been a journey. It's really been a journey.
Well, it was really great to hear from you and learn about your story.
You too. And I'm reading all of these questions in the Q&A too. I know we're already strapped for time, but thank you all for having me, and follow the journey, and hopefully the film will be out soon so you can share with your family and your friends, your community, and to those who are trying to make it into an industry that feels very unknown to you. Just, it's possible. If you were given that dream, it was meant for you to bring it to life in your lifetime. Know that like your dreams are yours and no one can take that away from you.
Ooh, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you even though we can't see you. And Doris, you are a bright light and I can't wait to follow your career and see what you do. So we really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck to everyone in your journeys. And I hope you all have a good night.
Yeah, students, you're amazing as well. Yeah, thanks for prepping tonight and being here. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.